Gardner Hype Cycle, you've got that initial burst. This is the greatest thing. It's going to solve world peace, sliced bread. And then we realize it's going to be a lot harder to do. So now we can start to look at how we can operationalize and build a digital twin just straight from reality capture. That's very exciting to me.
Please welcome John Niles and his Leveraging Visual Twins into Digital Twins, a Promising Integration.
Thank you, everyone. Just by a show of hands, how many folks here are facilities managers or work in facilities and operations? Okay, a couple. All right. So yeah, I'm John Niles. I help owners figure out all the stuff that you see out on that exhibit hall floor. I figure out how to help them integrate that all in to their tech stack. I've worked for a number of different companies in a lot of different fields, and so I kind of bring that kind of holistic approach to how to help owners figure out and implement digital twins ultimately. Just a little bit about my company. I started out with a small company called GAFCON Digital about 2 years ago. We were then acquired by an Answer Advisory, which is primarily a construction management, project management company. And then we were acquired by Accenture. So we went from about 17 people to about 750,000. Within that group, we are part of Industry X, and we're in infrastructure and capital projects. So that just gives you a little bit about my journey in the last few years, and we're educating folks in that industry now around digital twins and what we can bring to the table. We provide really basically three services: strategic consulting, and then also systems integration. So figuring out how to put all the software together, all the hardware together, and make it all work together, reduce those silos, and make that data transfer from design all the way out to construction and into operations. And then we also provide staff augmentation. So folks can actually use us to get started so that they're not just left with software that may not necessarily work the right way. So our agenda real quick today, and I've got a few slides I'm gonna go through and try and go through them fairly quickly so that I can make sure I preserve some time for both Scott and Daniel. Challenges that we're seeing in the industry for adopting digital twins. Convergence of visual and digital twins. Digital twin technologies, how AI and IoT are enhancing those digital twins now, and then the benefits for our facilities management teams or our owners. So I kind of represent that guy, Milton, if anyone's seen Office Space. I used to be in facilities, and I would inherit a mountain of paper to deal with. And at some point, they said, hey, let's do digital delivery. We'll start putting everything on CDs, we'll put everything on disc, we'll put it in the cloud. It'll solve everything, right? Problem is we never could find what we were looking for, even when it was digital, because we either had a subscription service or we had some sort of disc that was now corrupt or it didn't work the right way. So paper still rules in facilities, right? We'll just go to the plan files and pull those out. That's how our owners are working with their data. Along comes digital twins. Now we can actually start to pull all this data together if we do it the right way. So the graphic on the right-hand side is really, can Milton find a spot in the office again instead of being in the basement? So let's just kind of explore that as we go through this. So some of the challenges in adopting digital twins, I'm not going to read this whole thing for the sake of time, but we've got to identify those hurdles. So one of the things that we look at when we look at digital twins is that it's been around for a while, the concept, but it's been really misunderstood. And then when we've tried it before, it's either been one of these things. or a combination of them. Too difficult, too expensive, the data quality sucks. You know, it just doesn't work the way you expected it to. That leaves a bad taste in everyone's mouth. They don't want to implement it. Also, the difference between as-built and record models. We get BIM models and we think, oh, they're the holy grail. They're not. They don't necessarily, if they didn't have all that data put in the right way, they're not going to work. They're not going to show what you need. Also, trades don't necessarily participate. So you're missing pieces of that data that are critical to making good decisions. Software and hardware, we all know the perils with that. So how does Milton, the facility manager, navigate all that stuff? Well, if we take the Gardner Hype Cycle, which is basically business maturity or hardware maturity, and we overlap it with hype cycle or a hype level, you've got that initial burst where it's like, oh, this is the greatest thing. It's going to solve, world peace, sliced bread, and everything, right? But it doesn't necessarily work that way. And so what we do is we develop that digital twin hype cycle. And really that's, going through the innovation trigger, right? And then up to the peak of inflated expectations, right? We've all been there. We've all watched digital twins go through that. And then we realize it's going to be a lot harder to do because we either don't have the hardware, the software isn't matured, things like that. And then what I would say in the last probably year, in my opinion, is that NVIDIA and Jensen Huang did a keynote on digital twins and opened everybody's eyes to it. And I would encourage you guys to take a look at that keynote. It's a year old, but it's really informative. It shows how digital twins work and how they're using them in NVIDIA. And I think at that point, I started to hear a lot more discussion around digital twins. So now we're in that slope of enlightenment, right? There's also been the folks that behind the scenes, a lot of folks here in this room that have been silently working behind the scenes to build digital twins. They haven't been sharing them. For instance, Kelly Walt was up here earlier, gave a phenomenal presentation on what they're doing at the DFW airport. So those are the types of things that are slowly getting out, but for the most part, it's those silent achievers that are building that stuff out. So one of the challenges, Ben, that I've seen is that just BIM is not going to give you a digital twin. There's a lot of discussion around that BIM is a digital twin. It's not. It's part of it, but it's not all of it. You've got the design models. You've got all these different data points that don't necessarily get connected together, right? That whole as-built to record model, did all the trades actually participate? And then we got reality capture. And I was like, oh, all right, that's it. Now we got the holy grail, because now it's not LOD 300, it's real. You've got everything that you need to see. Problem is that you've got to pull all that data together too. So you've got this overlap where you have what I consider reality capture of the visual twin, and not a digital twin, but a visual twin, because it doesn't have any data. So we have that overlap. And then we introduce the data. And up until just a few years ago, you really didn't have the ability to tie reality capture data with asset data. And now we're seeing that with the products that are being offered out to the world, right? You're starting to see that connectivity. However, there's still incomplete data. But then you have the digital twin that all pulls that all together. So I look at a true digital twin as being something that combines both reality capture, that visual twin, BIM, so you're getting that geometry and that information within those models, and then the extended data that you would have for asset data. And when I say incomplete data in those areas that cover, it's because we're missing trade models. The furniture team doesn't necessarily model. The kitchen teams don't put all those models in there. And those are things that actually affect how a digital twin might perform. The other piece of it is that reality capture is missing that asset data. But that's changing now. So that's what I'm really excited about. One of the things that we should talk about too, though, with digital twins is that you have to have a company, an organization that's ready to adopt digital twins, right? We know very well it's an uphill battle if we have to try and convince someone who's a dinosaur in the industry that doesn't want to adopt any of these types of things. And then we move all the way to a pioneer and an evangelist that are actually going to be organizationally ready to adopt and implement digital twins. We should be focusing on those areas rather than the other ones. Those average and those dinosaurs, they're just not going to get there. You're not going to have success. You're not going to have buy-in. Like Kelly Walt was talking about with DFW, you've got that buy-in to try things, to do those POCs, to start to change the needle. So just to want to talk a little bit about digital twin technologies. So we know reality capture is the foundation, right? We can use it for validation. We can do it for due diligence support. We can now democratize that. With the platforms that are out there now, we can share that data with pretty much anyone who needs that data, needs access to that data so that they can pull that information. We can combine it with BIM models and start to see the context of that entire BIM model. So in the case down on the bottom right-hand side, we've got that reality capture, but we also have all the BIM models. Now we can start to bring logistics equipment in and start to look at that. As a facilities manager, I want to see that whole picture. How's that going to affect my facility? And then we have the common data environment. And that's really bringing all this disparate data into one place. For you to truly have a digital twin, you need to be able to bring all this data in. You've got to have a plan. You've got to have governance around deliverables for your data. How's that vendor going to send that data to you so that it makes sense in the context of what you want it to do? These are just a few things that enable some of those other items like VR, robotics. There's also a number of enablers that are actually now developed that are starting to come into play that are actually enabling digital twins to be created. I'm really excited about some of the things that are happening, on the gaming engines, with NVIDIA and Omniverse, and being able to pull those types of data together and visualize it in a way that was not possible before because it was just too big. The hardware wasn't fast enough. The software wasn't robust enough. And now we have that ability to do that now. So a little IoT integration. Let's talk about that a little bit. I always say start with the end in mind. Do not think that I'm going to build a digital twin because I've got BIM models. I went out and got some reality capture data. I'm going to pull those together. I've got some asset data. What are you going to do with the data? So you have to ask the organization, what do you want to get out of it, right? I'll give you a couple of examples of that. For this one, we actually were using a digital twin to track occupancy in certain rooms. How was that room being used? And you can see on the picture there, you can see all those dots on the right-hand side of the break room. No one was using the other side of the break room, so it's totally underutilized. Maybe we can convert that into another office or a meeting room. So those types of things, you start to get those patterns. But we started out with that end in mind, right? Same thing with occupancy. How are these office spaces being used? Obviously, we've got a lot of return to work sort of mandates now. What's that look like? How are those spaces being utilized? Especially if you're doing flex time at an office space. Maybe you're only going in there 3 days a week. How is that being used? Again, having that end point in mind. And then maybe it's just, I want to know what my air quality is like in my building. How's that graphing over time? How's my energy being used? What are those types of things that I want to get out of the digital twin? Again, starting with that end in mind. This one's actually a heat map to understand how many people are congregating in certain areas. Again, what do you want to get out of it? That's the big question. And then we can dashboard a lot of those things, right? Start to build KPIs off of this. So these are just a couple of the different platforms that are out there. This one is actually Azure Digital Twins, using live data that's coming in, visualizing through Azure, and building out. And then Autodesk Tandem, I think a number of you all have seen this before. Autodesk has their Tandem product. They've developed it really quite well. But again, it's taking all that data and understanding how much data you want to put in there. One of the things we found out right away doing proof of concepts was what was the frequency of the data collection. Again, when Kelly was talking about DFW, it was like, maybe I only want to pull data every 15 minutes. You don't need it every second, even though you could. But you're going to run out of data storage before too long if you're just collecting everything. So you have to be very careful about what data, what that frequency is for collection. This one's AWS Twin Maker, again, taking that data, pulling it in, using Grafana to actually visualize it, and then run analytics on it. And these are just 3. There's other ones out there. So going back to the facility management use cases, what are the things that Milton would want to know to get himself out of the basement? Right? So, hey, first one, use case, employee well-being. If I'm in the basement with no light, maybe it's not a good place for me to be, right? And so we can start to add sensors, IoT, into that BIM model and start to collect that data and understand. Maybe it's air quality. Maybe it's compliance for LEED certifications. Whatever it is. The other one is predicting maintenance. When are we going to have to change those pumps? When are we going to have to change those filters? How old is it? Those things actually matter a lot when you go to sell the property, right? Understanding what maintenance has been done on your building inherently has got to be more valuable than a building that doesn't have any data. At least it's going to be much more attractive to someone who may buy the property, right? So Milton might like the new ownership. So the other one would be that use case 3, which is the space utilization, right? Milton wants to get out of the basement. He wants to move up back into the office. He's got the tools now to monitor if those cubicles are available. So here's a couple of items I just want to leave with what I think are the next wave of what I call interactive twins, but also the new technology is coming out. This one is from Preview 3D, where you actually can walk through a facility. How does that help Milton? He might want to go on vacation someday, and he may want to actually have somebody else from one of the other offices jump in there. They can do that very easily and see that facility, walk through it. Maybe it's safety. Maybe it's working out some new scenarios with the design team. How does that piece of equipment fit in there? Will that piece of equipment get out the door? Or do we have to tear a wall out to make it work, right? Those all matter. This one's actually from Centu, and they're actually working on items where we can use VR on reality capture, but now we're starting to get that data linked to that visual twin, that reality capture data. So now we can start to look at how we can operationalize and build a digital twin just straight from reality capture. That's very exciting to me. There's a lot of things that are coming along, especially with AI, being able to look at nameplates on equipment and being able to pull those types of information in to auto-populate. It's going to take some time because these data sets are huge. But I'm very excited about what's to come on that. And then we know all about Spot and Faro with their ability to take autonomous robots out and collect data. We have good BIM data. We have good reality capture data. We can start to look at things as they're changing over time. We can start to look at things or listen to things that may be getting ready to go wrong in the building, right? That autonomous collection then also allows us to update our models, either through reality capture or BIM. So in closing, Milton's got a lot of tools at his disposal now, and he might get to go on vacation. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you.